Hidden deep in the world's thickest jungles are tribes who speak languages so rare, even groups close by can't understand them. These languages have been passed down through generations, completely unique to the people who speak them. These are real tribes found in the jungle that speak a language no one can translate. The biggest uncontacted tribe on Earth is deep in Peru's Amazon. They're called the Mashco-Piro, hunter-gatherers who vanished into the jungle hundreds of years ago to escape the violence during the rubber boom, and they just stayed out of sight ever since. Their language is a very old dialect of the Piro language, which is loosely related to what nearby Yine people speak. Yine can understand maybe 80%, so there's some overlap, but a lot of it is completely foreign to linguists because outsiders never properly studied it. No one really knows how many of them there are, but experts think it's somewhere around 750 people, and most have had zero contact with the outside world. They avoid outsiders like the plague, literally, since disease is a big threat to them. Recently, some Mashco-Piro have started showing up along rivers and near logging areas, probably because illegal deforestation is pushing into their territory, but still, no one's had enough time with them to actually study their language. So it's one of those rare cases where we know the language exists, but we have no idea what they're saying. The Korubo live way out in the Huaorani Valley in Brazil, right at the edge of the Amazon near the border with Peru. This place is so deep in the rainforest, it might as well be another planet. The tribe is famously private, they don't want contact, and they don't need it. Most of what we know about them comes from a single small group that had brief contact back in the 90s. They speak what's known as the Panoan language, part of a group of indigenous languages spoken in the Amazon, mostly across Peru, Brazil, and Bolivia, but nobody's recorded the full version, not even close. A dialect spoken by the uncontacted Korubo is completely undocumented. A few words were picked up from the small group that had contact, but those people had already been isolated for so long that even their dialect was different from neighboring groups. The Korubo have been called the clubbers because they carry these huge wooden clubs and aren't shy about using them to keep outsiders away. And you can't really blame them. When contact does happen, it usually leads to sickness or worse. The Awa are another isolated group in the Brazilian Amazon, and they're about as hard to find as it gets. Out of the roughly 350 Awa still around, at least 100 are what they call uncontacted, meaning they live completely off the grid. They're hunter-gatherers, super mobile, and known to pack up and move at the first sign of trouble. They use a language called Quaja, which is technically part of a larger family of languages, so it's related to a bunch of other indigenous languages in Brazil, but the version the uncontacted Awa speak is totally different. Nobody's recorded it, no one's written it down, and the people who speak it, well, they're off the grid, so even the other Awa groups who've had some contact, the dialects just vary so much that it's tough to pin anything down. They don't just avoid outsiders, they avoid pretty much everyone, even other indigenous groups. So the chances of anyone sitting down and studying their language is very, very unlikely. In the middle of Ecuador's Yasuni National Park, one of the most biodiverse jungles on Earth, there are two groups, the Tagaeri and the Taromenane, who've completely cut themselves off from the outside world. They're part of the larger Huaorani family, but they split off decades ago. They're known as voluntarily isolated, and the Ecuadorian government has laws in place to protect that. So about their language, since they're related to the Huaorani, it's assumed they speak something similar, but nobody's actually studied it, and no one's had any kind of extended contact to even confirm that. The only thing we really know is that it's different enough that even the Huaorani who do have occasional contact can't fully understand it. Most of what we know comes from neighboring indigenous people and rare reports from illegal loggers who had run-ins with them. The Chitonahua live in the Peruvian rainforest in a remote area called the Chitonahua Reserve. Even locals don't go unless they have a really good reason. They've managed to stay mostly uncontacted, and they move around a lot, which makes them nearly impossible to track. When it comes to their language, it's part of the Panoan family, same as a few other tribes in the region, but the Chitonahua version is unknown to outsiders. There's no written record of it, and there are no recordings. The few times they've been seen or heard by other people, the language they speak has stood out as different, even from other Panoan speakers. The little we do know has come from brief encounters with nearby tribes. That's basically it. Because they've stayed so hidden and avoid contact at all costs, linguists just haven't had a chance to study their language. So we know it exists, we know it probably is related to other languages, but beyond that, we really got nothing. The Nukak are one of the last nomadic peoples left in Colombia, living between dense rainforest and armed conflict zones. They were only officially discovered in the 80s, and right away it became clear their world is nothing like the one we we know. They still use blowguns, they travel in these small bands, they speak a language called Nukak. It's a tonal language, and so this is really cool. It means that a tiny change in pitch can totally flip the meaning of a word, so even if someone tried to guess at it, it'd probably get it completely wrong. Some linguists who worked with recently settled Nukak have managed to write down basic phrases and grammar rules, but the people still living nomadically, that version of language could be wildly different. Because of guerrilla fighting, logging, and coca farms moving in, a lot of these communities ended up scattered. Some groups managed to hang on to the way they've always spoken, but others, especially the ones near towns, have started to lose it. So now the language is kind of split off into different versions, and some of those aren't even spoken anywhere else. If you ran into someone deep in the forest speaking the old version, there's a pretty good chance even the Nukak wouldn't fully understand it. The Togutil live in the rainforests of Halmahera, one of Indonesia's lesser-known islands. Most people haven't heard of the island, let alone the people living in the forests there. They built shelters from palm and bamboo, they hunt with bows, they keep their distance from just about everyone, including other nearby tribes. They speak a language that's believed to be a branch of Tobelo, which is used by people on the coast. But the Togutil version has taken on a life of its own. There are two main groups of Togutil, one that occasionally interacts with nearby villagers, and one that doesn't. The group that still lives deep in the forest speaks a version of the language that's barely heard by outsiders. Linguists know about Tobelo and they've studied parts of it, but the forest version spoken by these isolated families hasn't been recorded. The Yaifo live way out in the highlands of Papua New Guinea, in a spot so remote that just getting there is a whole mission on its own. British explorer Benedict Allen was the first outsider to reach them in 1988. He was still a student at the time, and he wrote that they displayed a, quote, terrifying show of strength, and did a dance where they showed off their bows and arrows. But what he saw stuck with him for decades, and in 2017, he tried to go back, alone, and he ended up being missing for weeks. He eventually did make it out, he was fine, but he still didn't get close to the tribe. That's how hard they are to reach. No one's really studied their language, but it's thought to be a dialect of something called Neti, or Neet, which is one of hundreds of languages spoken across Papua New Guinea. Even neighboring tribes barely understand each other, so you can only imagine how far off the grid the Yaifo dialect must be. In the forests of the Gran Chaco, Ayoreo have managed to avoid being pulled into the modern world. They move in small family groups, setting up temporary shelters, hunting with traditional tools, and steering clear of the ranchers bulldozing their forest. Most Ayoreo today live in settled communities and speak a version of the Ayoreo language that linguists have studied a little bit. But the Totobiegosode are different. They're a subgroup of the Ayoreo, and their version of language hasn't been documented nearly as well. Even other Ayoreo say they can barely understand them. Researchers haven't been able to spend time with them without disrupting their lives or putting them at risk. Some people have tried. There are a few aerial photos, footprints, and abandoned camps have been found, but the language itself, no one's ever sat and listened, let alone recorded a conversation. In the rainforest of eastern Ecuador, there are still a few Huaorani clans living completely off the grid. Most Huaorani people have made some contact with the outside world over the years, and their language has been studied a little, but some of these isolated families haven't spoken to outsiders in decades. And even other Huaorani say they can't fully understand what they're saying anymore. Huaorani is already a rare language. It doesn't belong to any known language family. It's what linguists call an isolate, meaning it has no relatives. And that makes any offshoot version of it even more mysterious. These isolated clans broke off in the 60s, and they never came back. And it's not just pronunciation that's changed. When languages evolve in isolation, they can shift in really big ways. Word meanings change, new phrases pop up, old ones disappear. So while technically it might still be Huaorani, what these families are speaking out in the jungle could be totally unrecognizable to anyone else. I've been your host, James, and I will catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video.